Hi, I'm Rob Pritchard and I'm the sports editor at Manx Radio. There was plenty of excitement when, in late May, it was announced which sports will make up the 2029 Island Games, which the Isle of Man was confirmed as hosts in July 2024. Of 18 sports available to make up the Games, 14 have been selected, with those various disciplines no doubt excited to get planning underway over the coming years. However, this means that 4 sports have to be left out, and for 2029 that will be bowls, judo, sailing and shooting, a decision which will leave a number of people and organisations disappointed. In response to that recently, Minister of Education, Sport and Culture Daphne Kane said she sympathised with the sports which had missed out, but that criteria for selection was clear and they would get their opportunity on the international stage in future. One of those unhappy with their omission is the Isle of Man Target Shooting Federation. Nathan Holden, speaking on the Federation's behalf, explained what their reaction has been to not being involved in a home games in 5 years' time.
Well, to be honest, I think there was widespread shock, a bit of bewilderment, not just, within the Federation, but across the sports on the island. By way of background, shooting has been an ever-present sport at the Island Games up to now. The very first games was obviously 1985, and shooting's always been in it. It's like swimming and athletics, the same. And given, I suppose, the history, of shooting in the Isle of Man and the kind of the success that we have on the international stage, if you look at the Commonwealth Games, for example, there's been 12 medals won at the Commonwealth Games by the Isle of Man. 6 of those, half of them, have come from shooting. And the Island Games has always been a really sort of important and key stepping stone, really, for the local athletes to kind of work their way up and sort of progress from there and, hopefully go on to that major international stage. And we've also won over 180 medals for the Isle of Man at the Island Games in shooting. And I guess we just it just didn't really cross our minds that shooting would be one of the sports that could, miss out when the Isle of Man hosts. It was very surprising.
And how was the decision not to include shooting alongside bowls, judo and sailing as well, the other 3 sports that have missed out for 2029? How was that communicated to yourselves as the Federation?
Well, we found out basically on the same day as the rest of the island. The press release went out and we received a notification that said we were one of the 4 sports that unfortunately didn't make it into the Games. We had no real idea of what the criteria was. So we went back and immediately kind of said, well, can we get some feedback? Can we understand, why it is that shooting hadn't been picked? And, we got some information back. It was basically they sort of told us that the criteria were, they looked at 5 areas. They wanted sports that could facilitate and deliver a high-quality spectator experience, sports which have high numbers of female participants, sports which can be facilitated predominantly in the east of the island, minimal journey time on games transport to move between accommodation and competition venues with the least environmental impact as possible, and events and competitions that are as low cost as possible to deliver. Now, it came as a bit of a surprise to us, I suppose, that none of those criteria were kind of sporting related. It didn't look at the kind of things that we probably made assumptions that they would, such as, the sort of the medal prospects and, just likelihood of success and being able to, I suppose, showcase sort of different sports that the Isle of Man is successful at. So I think we were surprised to find out that that's what the objectives were. There was nothing, I think we got a questionnaire back in June 2023, just before the Guernsey Island Games. I believe that went out to all of the 18 potential sports, and we filled that out and sent it back, and it asked for a lot of data on various different things, and some of those aspects were included in the questionnaire, but they weren't the only things included in that questionnaire.
What criteria, if any, do you feel that shooting actually fulfilled that would have actually been meeting the requirements of what they want for 2029?
Well, I think, to be honest, none of the criteria, we don't feel that we really failed completely on any of them. There was this question of venues being too far away from Douglas, but actually, as far as it goes, I think there was only one location right at the north of the island which would have potentially posed a problem. Our ranges are just outside Douglas, maybe 5 miles away as the crow flies, one out in St John's. Airgun would have been hopefully within the sort of Douglas-Onken area. They also looked at the costs of facilitating, but our projected costs were very low. We were looking at a total of 20,000, potentially, hopefully brought down to 12,000. And if you're looking at, say, shooting bringing in 200 competitors, which is pretty sort of standard, then I guess, that's only about £60, maybe £100 a head per person. So I'm sure it would have brought more to the Isle of Man economy than not. One of the things that the Isle of Man looked at, I believe, the bid committee, was the male to female ratio. Not so much the actual number of female participants, because the Isle of Man actually does very well in terms of the number of female entries and so on that we give to the shooting, to the Island Games. I think in terms of the Isle of Man team composition, shooting provided, the fifth highest number of female entrants, third highest if you're looking at just the individual events, because obviously the team events do have big squads. We actually had a lot of entries into events. We had a lot of success as well with women. The youngest individual female medalist for the Isle of Man at the last games was a shooter at age 16. And so I think by focusing just on the ratio, I think we've it's not really taken in the full context, because our sport is actually a really good sport for women. It's one of those where women can compete on a level playing field with men. We don't have to have women and men separated. And that's because it's a skill-based sport at the end of the day, largely focused on your sort of hand-to-eye coordination. It's a very inclusive sport. We have the ability to include disabled athletes as well, alongside able-bodied athletes. So there are real advantages to the sport. And as we found at the last games in Guernsey, there were a lot of events that were considered to be open, where male and female competitors were competing head-to-head, and women did perform well. Women won medals in those events. There were 2 female teams that beat male teams. There was a mixed team with a man and a woman. They were up against male teams and they won. There were plenty of individual women that performed very well. I think some 4th and 5th places came very close to medaling, one of which was, one of our own entrants in the English skeet. She came 5th, and in doing so, she finished ahead of 16 men, So it is a sport that is really strong for women, and we also actually have a lot of female members on the island. It is just one of those sports as well, I suppose, that it does appeal to men. So, you kind of the ratio, there possibly is an imbalance there. But again, going back to that criteria, because we didn't know what that criteria was, we weren't ever really given the opportunity to kind of say, well, these are the things that we could do. If you're wanting to achieve a games with as even a number of male and female as possible, we could have tailored the events, to make sure that there was a fair sort of split, if you like. It could have been done that way. It was just, unfortunately, they've kind of looked at data from 3 previous games, which we have no ability to control. That's happened, and it's a shame that they focused on the past rather than what we could have potentially achieved going forwards and in the future. And I do feel that that's a missed opportunity from the Isle of Man, to be honest.
Between now and 2029, there will be 2 more further island games. So Orkney next year in 2025 and the Faroe Islands in 2027. But what is the shooting side of things for those 2 games, as far as you know at this point?
Orkney, unfortunately, has had to the shooting over there is withdrawn. Faroe, to the best of our knowledge at the moment, is that there will be shooting in some form, but I believe that's still to be confirmed. So I think we're going to have to kind of look at ways that we can, try and bridge that gap, because it is really important for our local athletes, and we've got some really talented up-and-coming kind of young shooters. There needs to be something that they can aim for, and we've kind of gone from this very strong position from having Island Games followed by a Commonwealth Games cycle, which sort of helps develop and sort of bring these people through. And even the Commonwealth Games, we know we're still waiting for news as to whether there is going to be a 2026 Games. So it's a difficult one for our sport at the moment. I think we're going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit and kind of find ways that we can, I suppose, try and still ensure that the Isle of Man gets, the sort of our sport achieves that success that it's brought, and keep going on the international stage.
You maybe think you might have to just regroup a little bit over the next couple of years. So how might you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's difficult to say, I suppose, right now. But there are maybe some other kind of international bodies that we could try and kind of associate with and try and maybe enter some more international competitions that way. The other alternative, I suppose, is to do what some of the other sports have done over the years, which is to try and organise like a sort of an inter-island championship, to sort of take the place, I suppose, of the Island Games, sort of open to those islands again. It's not easy to do, unfortunately. I think with shooting, we do face some unique challenges because I think transport of our equipment and things at times can be quite challenging. There's permits and things like that involved, which the Island Games again was brilliant for bypassing, really, because we had the benefit of chartered flights and so on. So you didn't have to worry so much about how do I get from A to B and get through the different jurisdictions and so on to get to the final destination. So we will go back and we'll have to look at it and just see what we can do.
Thank you for having the stamina to make it to the end of the Manx Radio Sportscast. You're clearly someone who has their eye on the ball at all times. Want to hear more about the latest sporting news across the Isle of Man and much more? Then might I recommend you take the plunge and subscribe to this series or a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so that, in a flash, all of our finest moments take a winner's place on your smartphone. Thank you.